Okay, so we already got the growth rates. So now what do we do? Okay, now this process is pretty simple, but is a bit long. What we're going to do now is basically do this. We're going to type in, so right now it's 2023. So technically, now, please keep in mind that this is just a general calculation. By any means, I can't say that it's guaranteed to be in 20 years or that it's guaranteed to grow at this rate. You saw I'm getting these growth rates from these websites. These aren't 100% accurate. So sometimes this can fluctuate, but it can be around the average of this sort of range. But don't take this with full 100% certainty. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'll put 2023 over here, and I'll duplicate this. And on this one, I'll put 2024, duplicate again. Over here, I'll put 2025.
Right, duplicate again, and then 2026, and so on. 2027, 2028, 2029. Okay, so let's change this. This is 2027. This is 28. This is 29. So this will be 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2039, 2040, 2041. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And it's kind of the same thing if you said 19,031, 42, 43. So we have about 8, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so let's explore this.
Okay, so 20 years. All right. A lot of numbers. What we're going to basically do is this. We already know that it's going to grow from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until 27 by 12.8%. So what we'll do is, what's the 12.8% going to be calculated by the operating cash flow? That's what it's going to make consistently. So what we're going to do is we'll get the calculator. We're going to grab 8904. Well, we can put, because this company is really big, we can do this. Each digit can be like a billion, each whole digit. So we can do times, in this case, it has to be 1.1288%. You want to know why? Because if I do 12.8%, because obviously 12% and 89 is lower than 50 or something, right? In this case, I have to multiply it like if it was increasing by 12%, because that's like 100%. That's like 100. These are in terms of percentages in the decimals. So watch. Look, that'd be 100.5. Let's put 100, smaller, 113.45. Multiply it again by this 1.1288, 120.06, 120.06. And the next year, and you just keep doing this. 1.1288. There you go. Why are we doing this? Because look, every year the company is going to make money. I know the company is going to have more cash flow in 2025 than what it is now, obviously. So I need to find, like, let's say a range in which, factoring in the growth of this cash flow, how much in total from this growth, in sum in total, will the company be worth in 20 years towards what it's producing, so I can know the actual cost of what the investment costs right now, right? And you understand why this is so effective, because the stock price can go wherever it wants to, rather the intrinsic value can't. You're going to see. I don't want to spoil the surprise. Let me just put this here. It'll just be a bit more convenient for me. Under 14.56. Right, and this is the last year. We're going to calculate by 1.1288. Why? Because it's been 5 years now. After this, we're going to have to do 6.44. So 163.18. So 163. Did I do that right? Oh, okay. I was going to say like something's off. All right, there we go. 160. Yeah, because I had a mistypo. Look, you see, 144. That was 100. This was 114. So this would be 163.18. Right? Now we're going to calculate this differently. So we multiply this down by 6.44. So it'd be 10644. There you have it, 173.69. So 173.69. Multiply this again. 106.44. 184.87. And now again, I'm going to keep doing this. So it's 106, look, 106, 44, 196.78. 196.78. And then the same thing next year. 106, 44. Look. See, 196, same amount. Now this gave me 106.44, 209.45 billion. So basically by this analysis, not that it's going to happen for sure. By this analysis, this shows that Microsoft will be making an operating cash flow by 2031. Of course, I have to, when we get this in total, which I'll talk about, we obviously have to factor in depreciation with inflation. The dollar amounts of what $290 billion by 2031 is going to be a lot more than 209 billion, not because the dollars are worth more, but because the buying power is decreased. 209.45. And then by 2032, we'll do this again. 10, and this is the last time we'll do it. 106.44, 222.94. So 222.94. And then we can, let me just minimize this. That's the last time because we now have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Now we have to use on 11 to 20 by 2%. This is going to be pretty simple. Basically, it's going to be 102 because that's 2% increase, 227. So it's going to start to grow pretty slowly. And this to me isn't conservative, but because it's not a business I entirely understand to the fullest amount that it's the best investment. So I'm giving a conservative projection of 20 years, which is pretty high. Like that's pretty high. I would do it by 10 to 15, but we'll look. You'll see what this is about. I'm just showing you this. I wouldn't be showing you this if I knew this wouldn't be right. So we do this again. 102. Right in terms of years. 231.95. 231.95. And same thing. I know I can do this in Excel, but I want you guys to visually see. You don't learn if you do this on Excel. You have to learn exactly what's going on here in the numbers. Because the valuable thing is to do this stuff in your head. Good business is that one that you can understand in your head, not by just typing in things on the calculator and getting something. We're doing that, right? But that's just by getting 2%. But really the general concept. So again, 102%. 0.32. Now, 102. Again, this happened to me again. Okay, 246. Right, and this growth rate isn't that good because inflation is like 3%. So technically, you're losing money by 1% on the buying power because your dollars are losing buying power. What cost $100 next year it cost about 3% less. So that would be about $97 the next year. Look, it's like this. Here's the problem, right? What this means is that what costed $100 now, the next year now cost $103. So you have to get $3 more to pay for the same item. That's the problem. That's the problem with 10 years and 30%. The item cost 30% more than what it was 10 years before because the buying power of the currency depreciated. So when you have something growing at 2% when inflation is at 3%, dollars will go up by 3%, but the return is not even at the same and mostly better than the inflation. So look, we're going to calculate this by inflation. You guys will see the net and total return. 251, right? 251.07, and then again 102, 256.09, and 102, 261.21. Growing at a slow pace. Yeah, definitely growing at a slow pace. 102, yeah, 102. So this would be about 266.43. And then now finally, so we can get this over with, 271.76. Okay, so you might be saying like, what the hell is he doing? What's the point of all this? You will see. When you sum up all these totals, you're going to get the full valuation of what this company will be worth in $20 because of what it's producing. So what we're going to pay now is what it will produce in 20 years. That's the whole point of intrinsic value. 20-year operating cash flow valuation is, right, so what is it? Well, we have to calculate it. So I'll do it in a second. All right, so watch. Basically, 100.5 added by, I'm going to do this fast, 113.45, 120.06, 144.56,
163.18, 173.69, 184.87, 196.78, 209.45, 222.94, 227.94, 231.4, 231.95, 236.58, 241.32, 246.14, 251.07, 256.09, 261.21, 266.43.
And then finally, 271.76. There you have it. What does this number mean? What this number means is this huge number. This means that Microsoft is worth $4,119 billion, which is technically $4.1 trillion. That's in total what it's worth right now for 20 years. Because look, that's how you buy a business. When you buy a business, you're not buying it based on what it's just did. You're buying on what it's going to produce. Because that would be like stealing. You can't buy things like that. You have to buy, especially an asset, you're buying on a worth relative towards what it can actually produce. Right? So in this case, if the company we know surely can produce in 20 years, why I keep saying the surely, we have this amount. We know the company is worth $4.1 trillion because of what it will produce in total. And if we want to, we can add the 0.43. So what do we have to do next? Well, we have to put that for the share price because that's what the company's worth. That's what the company's future worth is going to be. That's what we're getting for our investment. What we're paying now is what the company will produce in the future. And this will give us a return of our money back. Because as each year passes, the more money it's going to make, and it's going to be relative towards what you're paying for. Sort of like a bond, really. It's like a bond. Like when you're buying a bond, you're going to receive the coupon rate, the interest, and the interest until you get the full payments later into the investment returns. And now you have more money. It's the same thing. So now what we have to do? Well, first of all, I have to put inflation on this. The current inflation, what I like to use is the average inflation of what the economy, the US has been for the past 100 years or more than that. The average has been about 3.3, if I'm not wrong. Let's just say 3.3. So that would mean that in 20 years, okay, I'll do this, but you guys, this was the most important that I want you guys to get across, right? It was this as itself. You guys with me? Because look, this is what it's showing of the operating cash flow, what it will be per each year, right? But I have to take in factor of inflation here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate very quickly the Excel. So let's go to the Excel. We're looking at Microsoft. So if we look at, let's change this, Microsoft. And in this case, we're using the operating cash flow. So total cash, 104.76. So 104. Now, this is in millions. So it'd be basically 104.70. That's in billions. 76. Yeah, it would be like that. It would be 104,000 million because it's 104 million. And then the cash flow, the operating cash flow, and also look at its shares outstanding. So it's about 12.88. There you go. And that's the same. This is about 604. 604. And then its operating cash flow, then 8904. So 8904. So it'd be basically also this is in millions. I forget 604, 8904. Right. So that'd be basically like that. It's in millions. 8904. Okay. So look at this. Why is this important? Let me show you this. You probably don't know anything what's going on, and I'll show this like in a different lesson. But I just want you to pay attention to what we have. Look, this stands for operating cash flow, right? These are in millions. So 89,000 million is 89 billion. You see, 89 billion, same amount. 6,000 million is about 6 billion. 104,000 million is about 104 billion. And look, I have each one short-term debt 604, 6.04 billion. Over here is about 104.76 billion. Same thing. And the growth rate is about the same too. Look, 12.88. That's about half of this. And this is about, the GDP. And there you have it. So look at this. By each year, the reason why I wanted to do it here is because it's counting inflation. The dollar amounts are higher because what this basically means is what's worth in 20 years, which was about 3.5 billion, is now 5.8 billion because of inflation. Right? So what that basically means is this. Whatever costed 5.8 Well, no, sorry, this is in millions. So this would basically be, this would basically, yeah, I get confused. This is basically 5.8 trillion. And what did we say here? 4.1. Look at that. Look at how inflation took a roll. This would be worth net in total from inflation. Inflation adjusted 3.5 billion. This in total will give you 3.5 billion adjusted with inflation. But in the future, 3.5 billion dollars today, or God, I keep saying 3.5 billion, 3.7, 3.5 trillion dollars in the future will be worth 5.8 trillion dollars in actual money over there. So that means if basically the cost of things have increased because you need to get $2 trillion more to get the same worth what you had here, 3 trillion. But you look, this is what you can see in total. Look what happens here. If you look at the Excel, what it's basically doing is from this number, and I can show you. So from inflation, we're getting 3546501. So it'd be about 3546061. I think it went like that. Okay. 3546, and this would be point now. 0.5. Let's just say 0.5. Okay, that's important. Now, just so we can recap, right? Why did I change this? Because look, you guys already remember what this is. It's all these added up in total. This is the amount I have to pay for this investment into the company because it's what the company will produce. That's what the company's worth, what it will produce. So, and I'm going to be paid by each year as the value goes up, getting closer to that valuation, that my business investment will be worth more if the company starts to make more money and projects to last longer than I thought. What this is basically saying is 3546.5 billion divided by the shares outstanding, right? Which would be, and I'll call this the shares out. That's what it means. Shares out to be 7.44 billion equals, we can do it here on a calculator. Oh, sorry, that was 3. So 3546.5, each digit is a billion, divided by 7.44 is about 476.68. Look, it's about the same, right? Because I can't calculate exact the digits and everything, but you can see it's the same. Just a dollar. It's the same. With this is pretty simple. So now you guys got the first intrinsic value. That's how you get the intrinsic value. You get what I did though? Because look, I'm basically getting the worth of the business. Look, the worth of the business is not what it's doing right now. Not what it's, of course, not what it's doing. It's more what it will produce, right? When you buy a farm, you're not buying based on what it produced before, right? Because in this case, the company can produce more. So you have to pay on what the company can produce more. So if I'm paying based on what the company can produce more in a very conservative time, which would be 20 years for sure, that it will grow in that 20 years, I have to pay about $3.5 trillion if I want to buy Microsoft. That's what that means, just so you know. If I want to buy Microsoft right now, I have to get $3.5 trillion because that's what the company's worth based on what it will produce. But as a shareholder, I can do that already. I don't have to have that amount of money. I can just buy the shares. I can buy a very, very small fraction of that money to own the ownership of that valuation, to own ownership of that company, to take advantage of that valuation. Remember, please keep in mind that this is the actual business valuation. And you're seeing it. We're actually getting solid figures throughout its statements of what the business is actually able to produce realistically. So you need to distinct the difference between what we're doing here with market cap, right? Recall that market capitalization is just referring to the liquidity of the stock, right? So we're looking at Microsoft. Microsoft probably has a market cap. I don't have the exact number, but let's say that the market cap, from what I see, is maybe $1 trillion, $2 trillion. Now, the market cap doesn't represent that Microsoft is worth. Please keep that in mind because a lot of people have this false conception about the market cap. Market cap does not represent the value of the company. The market cap is just representing the liquidity in the market. Remember that the stock market is an auction. That's just all it is. If you're selling an item throughout an auction, you know that an auction isn't going to always refer the actual price of item of what you're selling. That's the same thing with companies in the stock market. When you make a stock in the market, you have buyers and sellers. Constantly, people who are maybe pessimistic or optimistic tend to devalue or overvalue the stock, but not, I repeat, not the business. Whether people are bringing the price down of a stock, bringing it undervalued on the stock, or bringing it overvalued has nothing to do with how much the business is worth or what the business is producing. The business and what the business is producing is completely independent upon what people think, right? what the business is worth, because that's all there is. That's all that's all what stocks are about. Stocks have nothing to do with the actual price in the short term with these companies in stocks. If Apple has a stock called AAPL, right? That's Apple stock to provide liquidity for people who want to have ownership in the company. But a lot of times those ownership certificates, because that's what it is, are auctioned off at higher prices than what the business is actually worth, or prices lower compared to what the business is worth. That's all the point of stocks. But in the long term, right? Because you might be saying, okay, but then why does that make sense? Then how does the stock only show in the short term, but always goes towards the business in the long term? Well, that's because as the business starts to, reinvest capital into their own projects, starts to do R&D, starts to make their products more valuable because it's a really good company. That's the point of what you want to invest in. This business is going to be worth more and more and more. And the media is going to know over this over time, whether there's going to be bad earnings, good earnings. Overall, the bad earnings are going to appear less compared to the good earnings because the company's valuable, right? Now, does that mean that a good company won't have a lot more bad earnings compared to good earnings? No. Every company in the stock market will always have a time in where they're going to have a lot of bad earnings in the short term, but it's in the short term. It's temporarily. A lot of the times, because if a company has a bad earnings, doesn't reflect that the business isn't selling or as valuable as the company is able to put in their products or services. Because that could be a cause outside of the company. That could be an economic cause. That could also be internally that the product wasn't, maybe they had like some legal problem or some product that really just flopped, right? And many people dislike the product. But think about it, if there's a really valuable company and that valuable company made a product that people didn't really like, that doesn't matter as long as the company has really good products. Like if Apple produces the next a next iPhone and it's completely horrendous, it's so bad, of course that's going to affect the company's earnings throughout in the short term because a lot of people are not in demand for that product. But does that mean that the next products that are going to come out or the still existing other products that Apple's are going to produce are going to have the same result? No, that's what I mean. So that's why, if a company's inevitable, that maybe sometimes they can have a really bad earnings in the short term over clusters, maybe for bad earnings, but that does not mean that the company is worth less over what it's actually able to produce in the next 20 to 30 years. Because what the company is doing right now in terms of that sort of product is not much an effect. Now, it's a bigger effect if the company has this idea and it is struggling to change everything what they're doing. That's something different. Changing everything in the terms of like what they're doing now, the reason for them to change everything is because probably what they're doing now isn't working well. Maybe they're in high debt, maybe they have a lot more capital expenditures. Those are completely avoidable if you looked at them beforehand in their statements and really analyzed them in their filings and their 10Ks, right? So that's what I mean about that. That's why Benjamin Graham says that the market in the short term is a voting machine, but in the long term, it's a weighing machine. What's the weighing machine? Well, what it's actually factually producing in its statements. And that's what we're doing, right? So that's why the business valuation, let's say for Microsoft, is about $3.5 trillion, not because I think so, but because it actually is. Now, is it worth exactly $3.5 trillion? No, because no one can give you an exact number, but we can have a very high accurate number throughout that by looking at what it's actually producing right now. And so that's the key thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to be talking about this, of course, in the next few minutes. I just wanted to let you know, because maybe you were a bit confused when I talked about that this is the valuation, because you probably thought about the market cap, but keep in mind that the market cap is just representing the liquidity about people who are buying and selling in that stock, right? So if you look at Apple, Apple is the highest market cap as of right now. I don't know in the future, but it's the highest market cap company in the world. Not because that doesn't represent that Apple is the most valuable company in the world, right? No, not at all. That just represents that there's a lot of liquidity in Apple compared to others. Very, very important. A lot of people don't think that. See, like I'm buying a company that is making 89 billion and will make in 2042 271 billion. It's a good investment. What we're doing here is we got this amount and it gave us 477. Now what do we do? Well, I just call this intrinsic debt. It's the total debt, which is 6.4 billion divided by the shares outstanding, right? Because it shows the debt per share. So we can call this the debt. It's really called the debt per share. The debt per share. Because it shows the amount of debt each share has right now, not in the future, because we don't know how much it will increase or decrease in the future, just the debt it currently has. So that would be about 604 divided by the shares outstanding again, which would be 7.44 billion equals, let's see, 604 divided by 7.44. Yeah, it would be about 81 cents. So it's 81 cents. All right. Now what we do too is the cash per share, right? Which grabs the total cash and divides it by the current shares outstanding. It shows the cash per share. You see how this, it's like the statements is along with the shares. You're owning the statement. You're owning the business. You own what it has already in the statements. It's assets, it's liabilities. You get all of that as being the shareholder because you own the company. That's what the point is. This is why I keep trying to put this as important so you guys can understand what the hell investing is about. This is what it's about. When you're buying a company, you're buying literally the entire company. That's what it is. But when you're buying a share, you're buying a proportion of that company already without requiring a significant amount of capital, like $3.5 trillion. Not everyone has $3.5 trillion, but people have $477. If you buy 10 of these shares, 100 of these shares, you'll be able to pay $47,000. You have a worth of $47,000 per share. Right? But the cash per share is about 104, which is right here, 0.76 divided by 7.44 billion, and I forgot to put here billion too, equals about, let's see. So this would be about 104.76 divided by 7.44. Okay, it's about $14.08. That means that each shareholder has cash from the statement, $14 in extra. $14.08. Okay, the reason why this is all important is because, look, I'll call this the 20-year per share value. Now, what we're going to do is grab the per share value minus the debt per share, right? Because it's the cost added by the cash, because that's a good thing. We have the cash. You know that the intrinsic value is going to be higher because we have $14 to add to this. Cash per share equals about, we can do the math here, 477 minus 0.81 added by 1408. There you go. This is now the final intrinsic value. Okay. This is what Microsoft is worth, right? So what are the current shares? What's the current share price? 332. You're basically buying at a discount. You are. Because look, the company's worth that much. The company's worth $3.5 trillion. In other words, what the share price is doing, which is really the market cap, that's what it basically means, it's the market cap. Look, I can show you. It is the market cap. That's what the market cap is for. Let me show you. If we go to the market cap, what is Microsoft's current market cap? $2.48 trillion. Why is it $2.48 trillion? Well, it's simple. If you grab the current share price, right? Watch. If you grab the current share price, and I can show you with the math, 3.33405. Multiply it by the total shares outstanding. So it would be 7.44. This time I have to pull the full amount. So 74.44 billion. Oh no, it's just 7. My bad. Here we go. 7.44 billion. Watch. Look, you see? Exactly. This is trillion. 2.48. What does this show? 2.48. You see? This shows what the company's really, what the stock is showing me is basically what the company's selling for. So this is this simple. Look, the company's actually worth $3.5 trillion. And what is it selling for? Ladies and gentlemen, what is it selling for? $2.48 trillion. That means that if I buy this business, I'll be able to buy it at a 32% discount, and I'm guaranteed to make 47%. Why am I guaranteed to make, well, besides that, we'll talk about that eventually, but why am I buying it cheap? Because the company's worth $3.5 trillion. I explained it to you. What is it selling for? $2.48 trillion, because this is what the share price is selling for, added by the whole shares, which is the company's market offer price. The company's worth temporarily is at $2.48 trillion. What is it actually worth based on what it actually is producing in a conservative way in 20 years? $490, which is basically $3.5 trillion, while the company's at $2.4 trillion. That means I can actually just do this. Look, grab this, multiply it by this, and you're going to get, actually, you know what? Let me copy this. There you go. The company is basically selling for at $2.47 trillion. What is the company actually worth? $3.5 trillion. You see, this is so effective that you have to understand. This is how you invest in businesses. The company is selling at $2.4 trillion, and someone can come in. Why? Because that's how Elon Musk bought Twitter. When you want to buy a company, you can just, obviously you can't buy it out of nowhere in its stock. You have to notify the people in the company that you want to say, hey, I want to buy the whole company through its stock. Okay, It's worth $2.4 trillion because this is the total amount of shares. You have to buy all the shares from the share price. It's at $2.4 trillion. But when you know the company's worth $3.5 trillion and what it actually will produce, there you have it. You're buying something that's worth $2.5 trillion that's guaranteed to be at $3.5 trillion because it's making it, it's producing. This is why people don't understand investing, actually, because you're not investing in a stock. There's so many reasons why you're not investing into a stock that even the stock split shows it to you, that it reflects the share price based on the shares that are in the company. Now, what does this upside profit mean? Well, it's pretty simple. If you're buying something at $2.48 trillion, we're getting a 32% discount. But how much would it take for let's say for 2.47 trillion to get to 3.5 trillion? Okay, so it would take about 3.58 or 3.546,501 divided by this amount, 2.471996. You see? There you have it. Look, it's going to increase by 43%. It's the same thing. If the company was selling at half of this, so it would basically be 354,6,501.2 divided by 2 and divided by, divided by this, 7,435. There you go. In other words, if the share price was at $238, the company's selling at $1.7 trillion. That means you're guaranteed to make 100%. Why? Because how much would it take $1.7 trillion to get to 3.5? How much would it take? Well, it's easy. 3.546 divided by 1.77. Look, it would take double. So that basically means that if you buy it at what share price? If you buy it when the company's selling at $1.7 trillion right now, when it's actually worth $3.5 trillion, and that would mean when the share price is at $238, if the shares outstanding doesn't change, right? Shares outstanding can change, but if it goes by this to the share price, I'm guaranteed to make 100% of my investment because from 238 it's going to go to 490 based on what it's worth. You see? In other words, too, let me show you another cool trick. Another cool way to look about this as well is to basically say, well, if we grab $490 right here, which is the final intrinsic value, multiply it by 7.4 billion shares, right? So we would do 7,435 and actually put a billion here. There you have it. This is the final intrinsic value of the business. This means the business is worth $3.6 trillion because of what it will produce. We're being offered something that's worth $3.6 trillion to be trading at $2.4 trillion. You see, this is how you know when to invest. So my general rule goes like this, which I'll talk about in the future lessons. If you're buying a business that's 15% undervalued as the first threshold, depending how quality and how much you want to invest. If it's a great, fantastic business, 10 to 15%, you average a position there. If the stock goes down by 20 to 25%, you enter another position. Why? Because you're buying the business at a cheaper value, which you can buy more shares, buy more than what your first position was, because you're buying at a cheaper price and getting a more sure profit. Why? Because if the company goes down by 25%, right? Let me show you. If $100 went down by $25, which is 25%, it would be worth 75%, right? It would be worth $75. But how much would it take $75 to get to $100? It would take 33%. So you see, as the business trading value starts to go down, the more guaranteed you're going to make a profit. This is why it's so silly and it does not make a single bit of sense. There's absolutely 0% logical reason. No, it's zero. There's 0% logical reason that you don't want to buy when the price is going down. You're not an investor to me when you don't see it that way, because you're investing more in first, you don't understand it, and second, you're investing into the stock. And not even into the stock. When the price goes down, it's likely to go up. So by technical matters too. So you see, as $100 gets to $50, how much would it take $50 to get back to $100? It would take $50. $50 an extra. What's $50 divided by 50? Well, obviously it's 1, but that stands for 100. That stands for 100% gain. That's double. You made double because you made $50 in return. If it goes down by 50%, the share price, it will be trading at $50. How much would the business be worth? $100. Okay, so it's simple. If you're buying at 50, how much are you going to make when it goes to the business value in the long term? In a year, in 2 years, it doesn't matter. There you have it. You make about double your investment. You do this again. 100 divided by 50. You see, you're guaranteed to make double, right? Even though you're guaranteed to make 100%, even though the price went down by 50%. You see what I mean? Many people don't understand this. And I think you're missing, you're leaving out billions of dollars from not knowing this stuff. And this is very important for you to understand. If the trading value of the share price goes down, even though the business is making more in the business, not in the shares. The shares has nothing to do with the business. Shares have to do with the stock has to do with the business in the long term. The shares can do whatever they want in the short term. To me, the shares to me are just a trading price. That's all it is. It's not what it's worth. This is what it's worth. This is what it's producing, not what it's trading at. Because people don't understand what I'm showing you, what many people. So they only see technical things. I'm seeing the business as of itself. If 100 goes down to 30, that would be a $70 drop, right? So it's 70% drop, right? $100 by 70%, $70. So if it goes down by 100, $30. The share price would be at $30. How much would it take $30 to get back to 100 when the business is actually worth 100? You see, it would do 233% guaranteed. I'm not saying that it might. No, you're guaranteed to make 233%. I mean, the business is worth that. You see, this is why it makes no sense. Look, try. I can't change anyone, but you have to understand that the share price is what people think the business is worth, but it's not what the business is actually worth. It's what many people like you, many people like anyone who thinks what the business is worth based on macroeconomics or based on temporary issues or temporary nonsense, really, temporary events that's going on in the companies, or temporary, most of all, macroeconomics. Does inflation have anything to do with Microsoft? No. Is inflation going to stop Microsoft selling more services or cloud services or their Windows operating systems? Not at all. Is the Russia-Ukraine going to affect that? Not at all. Like, not a big amount. Is COVID going to affect that? No, in fact, COVID is going to induce that. Do you see that? This is why, okay, so then there's no reason for you to be scared on buying more. It has nothing to do with the business. See? What happens in the stock market is independent from what the business is making. This is why recessions or crashes in the stock market are the most valuable things you will get, because you're always going to be offered the best businesses in the world to be selling at 80% less of what they're worth. And that's what I saw in 2022. And I bought many of them, and now they're worth a lot because I saw like this was sure. I was getting a business that was worth, I don't know, each share was worth about per se four, like let me show you an example. Each share was worth about $400 and it was selling at 150, right? That would basically mean that the business was undervalued by 62%. What that means too is for 150 to get to 400, it would be 166%. Okay, so if I'm buying a business 62% undervalued, I'm guaranteed to make 166%. Recall that what I mean by guarantee is the fact that the business is still solidly producing as it should, right? Because sometimes the reason why I really say guaranteed in that factor is because, well, I mean, if you've analyzed the company and you understand it very well, it's a very, very, very hard chance for that company to alter its production phase. What is the production phase? Well, what that means is that if you're expecting the company to be worth right now to be worth $20 billion, but right now the market's offering it at 15 billion, right? So that means that, remember that 20 billion for 20 years, each year is making about $1 billion. However, if let's say the next year that comes by, let's say that next year that company made less, and then the next year it made less again. Maybe it was making less because a pandemic hit, right? And for that type of company, a company that likely would go down in that scenario is most likely a cyclical company like Disney or a bank, because that's more common for a bank. But despite that, if something actually happened that was out of your control, which is the company, this stuff like is normal for an investment. You did an investment, and maybe the next few years that company did a very bad decision in a product, and that caused their earnings or net income to go down for maybe 2 years, right? And the administration has took it poorly, so it's taken a bit of a bad hit on the company on that time, and the valuation that you had before is a bit higher than what it is now because the company's worth less, a bit less. That's the only scenario in which, whenever I say guaranteed, maybe I should kind of like fix a bit what I said. What I mean is it's almost guaranteed, right? It's not like, because nothing is 100% guaranteed, but it's almost guaranteed because at the end of the day, if the business just keeps doing what it's doing and it just develops better products, not astronomical products, but just what it's doing and reallocating its capital to efficient uses, then it's likely that that company is going to come up to that valuation that you got it to, or at least very, very close to that valuation. That's why I kind of say it's guaranteed. Why? Because of the cheap price that I'm buying right now, it takes a bigger percentage to get back. I love the math because it really has a huge difference. Now, that this is the end of the lesson. I just wanted to show you this, but I think you guys are very interested. I just wanted to show you this very basic concept. I'll explain a bit more in depth, like the CPI and these sorts of things and what you want to look for. But I think you guys are sort of on hook with this. Definitely cool. I learned I this propelled more with Warren Buffett. Like, look, he says this, which I liked his explanation. If a company is selling at $100 and has 10 million shares outstanding, is it worth $10 billion? Why? Because look, the company is trading at $100 and has 10 million shares outstanding. Or no, sorry, $100 and is selling at 100 million shares outstanding. Is it worth $10 billion? If it's worth $10 billion, he says it's got to be able to give you 700 or 800 million the next year, which basically would be a 7% increase in that valuation. Keep in mind, that's not on this. This is by cash flow. He's referring to the valuation. That's something valuable that you want to have too. If it isn't able to give you 7 to 8% or 700 or 800 million the next year, then it has to give you 10 or 15% more of that the year after it continues. And there isn't a lot of businesses like that. There's definitely not a lot of businesses like that are that valuable. No, that's why I don't invest in everything, because I look for businesses like that. I look for businesses that can give me that amount per year. That's why I don't invest in everything, no matter how great they look. If I don't understand them entirely with an extreme accuracy, I don't invest into them because I don't have that surety, let's say in 20 years or so, or this certain amount, that I'm buying a valuable business that will be worth more for sure in terms of others not compromising its certain products and services, because it will maintain this, right? It will maintain this growth if it can stay dominant in the products and services. But if I don't understand entirely the products and services, how the hell would I know if it will stay dominant in that specific area? So that's the problem that I have with Microsoft. I would rather prefer that other segment that I talked about, remember, to be 70 to 80%. But since I didn't see that and I don't understand as much cloud, and I try to, that's just my area of competency. That was like my limits of competency. And that's a great lesson to learn. You have to lower your limits of your competency. That way you won't go beyond it, or else you'll make very poor decisions that you think you know it when you don't know exactly. So you want to have things with surety without breaking the limit of your competency. You want to stick with that competency. I want to stick with something that I know for sure in seconds, or it doesn't take me that long, or I don't know the clear answer, right? If I don't have this, if I have this, I don't do it. If I don't have this, I do it because I understand it completely. Then afterwards, I look for the protocols, the characteristics like brands, branding effect, etc. And then for that consistency in its statements. And then afterwards, I already know automatically how long the business will continue to make money. And a lot of times it's 30 to 40 years for sure, more than 30 to 40 years. And anything after that, I'm not entirely as sure compared to the 30 to 40 years. So when I'm that sure in the 30 to 40 years that I don't know more than that, but I'm very sure in the 30 to 40, I stick with 30 to 40. And I put that on here. If this was Microsoft's case, I would put another 10 years because that'd be 30 years. So it'd be basically be 2052. But yeah, that's Microsoft's intrinsic value. Just, I wanted to explain you as much in how this was done so you can do it yourself. You're going to be automatically given this worksheet, but I don't want you to use this worksheet for everything you do, because that's not how, look, That's not how you make great decisions, or that's not, like, it doesn't induce brain activity in a lot. You want to think and have critical thinking when it comes to investing. And it's not that it's bad using an Excel, it gives things faster, but you have to understand things quickly and what the company's worth. A lot of the times, I don't even have to do much of the intrinsic value sometimes because I understand the business so well that I could say this business is worth $300 million in its market cap. I know for sure that in 10 years, it's going to be $2 trillion. And I know because of what it's doing. You see, that's that surety. That's what I want you to get. Now, I don't invest in it into one batch. I kind of congruently kind of create that similar if I have my intrinsic value close to it. But I use that as a factor, as definitely an area that I should combine with my intrinsic value. And that's that suring part of knowing the product. That's why knowing the product is so important, because you know how much the business is worth by simply doing it in your head. You know it without doing the calculation. But anyways, that's it for now. This has been how to get the intrinsic value for Microsoft. And in another lesson, we'll talk about more of getting the intrinsic value. All right. I'll see you guys in the next lesson.